أينما نظرت في مركز دبي العالمي تقع عيناك على عمل معماري شهير، فالمنطقة الممتدة على مساحة 10 كيلومترات تكاد تكون بستاناً للعمارة وملتقى لأشهر المعماريين.
التنوع المعماري ضمن DIFC صنع ما يعرف بالتناقض المحبب، أي الكونتراست بين العمارة الوظيفية التي تطغى على مباني المال والأعمال والعمارة التي تكرس المفاهيم الفنية. هذا ما سنحكي عنه اليوم ونحن ندخل هذا العالم الذي صنع بدقة وعناية.
من بين المعماريين الذين توزعت أعمالهم في مركز دبي المالي أسماء ذات تواقيع مؤثرة، منهم نورمان فوستر له عملان الICD بروكفيلد والإندكس تاور. أما برج سكاي جاردنز فكان من تصميم أتكنز أند بارتنرز. جيت أفينيو صممتها RMJM التي صممت أيضاً جامع DIFC الكبير. بيركنز أند ويل صممت برج ضمان. أما الجيت فيليج فصممتها GAJ مع هوبكنز أركيتكتس. أما مايكل هوبكنز فقد وقع مبنى السنترال بارك تاورز. جينسلر ولهم أعمال متعددة ومميزة من ضمنها The Gate Building، Park Towers والريتز كارلتون.
من بين هذه الأعمال سنختار 3 منها تحمل دلالات معمارية مختلفة، وهي البوابة لجينسلر، الجامع الكبير لRMJM والبارك تاورز لجينسلر أيضاً.
ندخل مركز دبي المالي عبر البوابة The Gate Building التي كلفت بتصميمها الشركة المعمارية جينسلر في سان فرانسيسكو.
البوابة مستوحاة من قوس النصر الفرنسي أو الآرك دو تريومف في باريس، ليوحي باحتفالية دبي ببيئة اقتصادية متطورة وناجحة. بالمناسبة أبراج الإمارات اللي وراي من تصميم المهندس الكندي من أصل صيني هيزل وونغ، واللي رح نحكي عنهم بالأيام القادمة. Mr. Raj, what was the main concept behind the design of the gate building?
When Gensler was invited to the design competition, we were actually invited a little late. Other firms had already started. And there was this desire to create something very iconic on this property. And there were 3 main requirements which we tried to take away from the brief. One is this great axial relationship between the World Trade Center, which was the first high-rise building built on the Arabian Peninsula late 60s, and then the Emirates Towers, and then this property. And then the second requirement was to create something that was permanent and of stone and something very iconic. And then the third, there was this reference to the Arc de Triomphe. We took those and created what was the concept of essentially a gateway, an opening that related to these other buildings, and also had this wonderful pedestrian path, which then leads to the master plan that came afterwards. You know, when you do financial buildings, and when you think of all the banks around the world, a lot of them in the past have been these heavy stone buildings because they want to give this image of permanence, security. But when you talk about financial assets and the whole idea of transparency. So it's this combination of creating glass and solid mass to evoke the sense that everybody can see what is happening, and there's this kind of transparency of what Dubai is doing, what the building is doing, what the occupants are doing, and yet it still has that permanence when you look at it of something very solid.
البوابة هي أساساً مبنى مكون من 15 طابق تشغلها بورصة دبي. يقوم المبنى المهيمن على برجين بارتفاع 60 متر. في الطابق ال12 يتصل المبنيان بممر هيكلي من الفولاذ. لإنشاء الممر كانت هناك حاجة إلى 8 دعامات فولاذية بطول 27 متر وبوزن 60 طن.
It's only when you really come inside the beauty and the materials and the detailing, that's when you really feel it. I think it's a great example of a building that's really stood the test of time. It's integrated outdoor spaces with indoor spaces, and during COVID, we've really found that indoor facilities have really been the hardest hit. And so the whole idea of an office building that is integrated with this beautiful pedestrian space that's outside and is integral as part of the building is something that I think has done really well. And in fact, in projects that we're doing right now, for example, we're doing a retail mixed-use facility in diplomatic quarters in Riyadh, and we've actually created an outdoor space, which traditionally we always think of retail as indoor. But we're using a new idea that pedestrian-friendly spaces that are shaded, like what you have here, can create better environments and healthier environments.
لم تصمم شركة جينسلر المعمارية البوابة فقد صممت مركز دبي المالي بكامله بعد أن وقع الاختيار عليها لهذه المهمة. الشركة التي أسسها المهندس الشاب آرثر جينسلر في بروكلين نيويورك عام 1935 لها سجل معماري حافل، فهي التي صممت برج شنغهاي الشهير ومطار دنفر وكاديلاك هاوس في شنغهاي. جينسلر اليوم هي واحدة من أكبر الشركات المعمارية في العالم وأكثرها قيمة.
Buildings in DIFC, do they follow a certain architectural criterion?
When we were creating the master plan, and it's a fairly good-sized master plan, we were very conscious at the outset that we didn't actually want this to be created by one hand, by one architect. What we wanted to create was a series of events and moments that have different thoughts and different people's contributions. We worked very closely with the client at the time to put in guidelines in place, so to sort of start looking at building heights, to look at spaces in between buildings, and we were very keen to keep the central sort of civic, this big gate building, the fantastic sort of gate building as the real heart, and kind of distribute out from there. So the concept actually itself is driven around narrow streets and a hustle and a bustle. We wanted to sort of bring in the idea of actually having some sort of natural cooling between the buildings, so creating these narrow areas which becomes the hustle and bustle as you see in other financial districts. We were keen to leverage that and then sort of create spaces that were also parks and mid-spaces and areas where people could come from the gate building. Everything is connected, everything is walkable, which is important in the way we live our lives right now.
How did you balance between the Middle Eastern environment and the commercial one in terms of the design?
They really wanted to create a civic heart, this symbol, if you like, that was really going to be the center of the master plan itself. The gate building itself acts as that symbol. It's a nod in terms of the architecture and the plan to the fantastic financial past of Dubai itself, but also looking at the future, how this building and this community can be placed within the world theater. We want to create the #1 address in Dubai. So we want to create this great financial place that's not just there for financial, but how can we make this the place to be and creating this community, if you like, this central space where people could come, they could live, they could work, and they could play. So we almost looked at it as sort of a resort style, a resort for workplace. Not just looking at the financial great houses around the world, but how could all those infrastructures support this financial future?
بالإضافة إلى كونه مركزاً مالياً مهماً على مستوى العالم، يمثل مركز دبي المالي تجمعاً مهماً لشركات الثقل المعماري. فجادة البوابة أو ما يعرف بالجيت أفنيو كلفت RMJM بتطويرها، وهذه الشركة هي نفسها من صمم برج السيتي بالاس في موسكو وبوابة الشرق في الصين وكثيراً من الأعمال المهمة.
صممت شركة RMJM الجامع الكبير في DIFC والذي سنذهب إليه الآن. لو حدث ووجدت هذا الجامع في أي مكان آخر لعلمت أن هناك خطأ ما، فهذا الجامع لا يمكن أن يكون إلا في DIFC. يقع الجامع الكبير في قلب DIFC. قدم مصمموه وهم RMJM كما ذكرت خطاً حداثياً متصالحاً مع ما حوله دون التفريط بالأسس التي يقوم عليها معمار الجوامع.
تقدم عمارة الجامع تفسيراً مختلفاً لجوهر المعبد من خلال هيكل خارجي بسيط وروحانية داخلية. تحيط بهيكل الجامع شاشة تسمح للضوء بالتسلل إلى داخل المعبد لتعبر عن النفاذ والشفافية التي يجب أن يتحلى بها عالم العمل والمال.
بعمارته المعبرة عن التسامح الإسلامي مع الحداثة، يقدم جامع مركز دبي المالي حالة من التداخل مع عمارة العالم بأشكالها المتعددة.
The form of the mosque is a simple cube that has a shell that's tilting towards Qibla. The building facade provides shading, which reduces the solar heat gain. With use of perforated Islamic texture, we've also managed to get filtered light inside the building on daytime. On the nighttime, it transforms into an urban lantern that brings soft light outside and becomes an icon within this environment. On the interior side, we've also used the Islamic patterns to give us motifs for the elements, such as the chandelier on the main hall.
What are some challenges faced in terms of the design of the mosque?
So there were several challenges. One of them was that we had to build on top of a retail precinct that's 2 levels below us, which gave us some technical challenges to deal with. The second one was that the mosque is a relatively small footprint, which means that we had to design 3 levels of building to accommodate all the functions, including the residences for the imam and the muezzin. Another challenge that we faced is that we are at a neighborhood where we have tall towers that are looking into the roof of the building. That means that we had to treat the roof as a 5th elevation of the building.
How does the mosque blend in with its surroundings?
So we had to take several decisions to work with this, especially the mosque doesn't have a dome as opposed to a traditional mosque. Also, the facade materials, when you look at that, we've used large glazed panels as well as perforated metal panels that have been used on the facade. These are the same materials that we see around us in this urban context.
البرجان التوأمان للبارك تاورز آخر ما اخترناه من عمارة مركز دبي المالي، وهما من أعمال جينسلر التي تكلمنا عنها.
يرتفع البرجين 180 متر، يتصلان بقاعدة متعددة المستويات أو ما تسمى بالبوديوم، تحتوي من بين ما تحتويه ساحات للتسوق، مطاعم، مسبح، منشآت رياضية متعددة مثل ملعب تنس وصالة جيمنازيوم. قطع زجاج البرجين يبلغ عددها 3200 قطعة، لكل قطعة حجم معين، لا توجد قطعة تشبه الأخرى، هذا بحد ذاته ما يوحي بالدقة والتفرد في التصميم. إلى هنا تنتهي حلقة هذا الأسبوع، كانت حول عمارة الDIFC. إلى اللقاء.